This feels like fanfiction. It's hard for me to think of another four words that say so much and are also so clearly used by people who are talking straight out of their asses. Like, I hear this used so much in casual discourse. It's something that pops up so frequently, and yet most of the time when it does, it's from people who are criticizing something that it doesn't even apply to. Take Hazbin Hotel, for instance. Not a good show in my opinion, but it doesn't feel like fanfic. I'd say its writing is bad, and probably from someone who's read fanfic, but that's not all it takes. You know, something written badly can read like fanfic, but you can't call something fanfic just from badness alone. That's not what it means. No, saying something feels like fanfic is a very specific type of criticism. It's like calling something a Mary Sue. It has its place when you use it right, but you gotta use it right, otherwise you're just devaluing the point. And that's what happened to this feels like fanfic. Nobody knows what it means anymore. I'm not sure if it's because this generation doesn't read fanfic as much, so they're lacking a frame of reference or whatever, but regardless, it is an epidemic, and I think the children need to learn. So for a while now, I've been searching for the most this feels like fanfic writing I've ever seen in something official, and it took me some time since it's not an easy combination. You've gotta have an old sort of soul to bring out something as lacking in self-awareness as fanfic writing needs, but I think I found it in the most unassuming place. See, if there's a series that's known for having spin-offs and remakes that people call fanfic, okay, there's a lot of those, but one of them is probably Avatar: The Last Airbender, and hey, honestly, I understand. Avatar was a once-in-a-lifetime show. It's got great action, settings, world-building, drama, characters and themes that dodge every trope you'd expect from a show of its time. It was complex, mature, funny, deeply introspective and meaningful, other positive adjective. Basically anything compared to that would seem a bit amateur, and it doesn't help that most other Avatar stuff just isn't that good. Whether it's Legend of Korra's literal mech fight finale, the TV remake's lack of subtlety, the live-action movies. Where do I even start with that? It's hard to find anything besides the first show that isn't just super disappointing, is what I'm trying to say. Yes, that means the new movie too. The animation was great, but the writing was ass, don't fucking talk to me. But they're also not fanfic. Does the world building in Korra suck? Yeah. Did the remakes have stupid changes just to be different? 100%. Is the new movie's character writing dull? Don't get me started. Still, not fanfic. And the fact people have been calling them that for so long is why the real fanfic's been able to slip by unnoticed. Allow me to present to you the original Avatar sequel, the comics. And I know what you're thinking, Braxton, what could warrant calling these fanfiction? Aren't they just one-off stories written for fans who wanted something new once the show was over? And I thought that too, it's why I never gave them a second thought. Not that I wasn't constantly fiending for more good Avatar content, I just knew they weren't gonna do much for me. And there's tons of perfectly fine but disposable comic tie-ins, so what would make this any different? Why should I care? I got the answer pretty fast when I read it, because these are fucking rough, buddy. I don't think I've ever had such a visceral, negative reaction to something as fast as I did when I read these. Granted, I just rewatched the show and loved it all over again, but that's what made me check them out, since they're supposed to be the canon continuation of the story. They literally start minutes after the last shot of the show, and on Wikipedia they're listed like additional episodes, so they're trying to stand next to the big guy here, and I'm almost sorry to say this, but that kind of just highlights how much worse they are at basically everything. And it's not just the quality that bugs me either, that I expected. It's called being an Avatar fan. We're basically made to withstand an unfathomable amount of letdown, but there was something new with these, something that screamed to me from the depths of its soul, Donut Steel. I could almost feel it pulsating off of these as I read them, and it just got worse with every book, page after page after page. It was nothing but that special brand of writing you can only get from a particularly bad fanfic, and the more I read, the more I knew that this was it. This is the holy text of what it should mean when you say something feels like fanfic. And just like each book of the show was about a new element Aang had to master, each book of this comic shows another side to what that means. Specifically, everything written from The Promise up through North and South. The canon also technically counts this other comic Imbalance as part of it, but it's from a whole different team, and honestly it's not nearly as bad, so just forget it. The only ones we're going to be talking about today were drawn by Gurihiru and written by Gene Yang. Starting with
Book 1. Ideas over logic.
So the first thing any sequel writer tends to ask themselves is something like, why does this deserve to exist? And it's a very good question, since most of the time when a story ends, it's from the writer deciding that they're done. It's finished. Every point was made, every arc explored. There's nothing left to tell in this particular story. So how do you justify keeping it going? In the mind of most writers, it's something like build on characters the original never thought to, find a new conflict that challenges the cast, just anything to make it feel like they're building on the story instead of digging up corpses hoping there's still a pulse. And the thing is, Avatar might be one of the hardest shows to do that with since it doesn't leave much room for add-ons. I mean, who's Aang supposed to fight next? He literally just beat the most powerful dictating firebender in the world on the one day in 100 years he'd be at his strongest. He's mastered the elements, saved the nations, traveled the world with his team who all went through their own personal arcs. Everything's at about the most perfect possible ending it could leave with, so where do we go from here? To space? God, I wish. But if you want to know what it takes to feel like fanfic, the first thing you need to learn is that nothing is over. Ever. It can only be over whenever they say it is, and they're not gonna be satisfied, so it's gotta keep going. Especially with this cool new idea they've got for drama. Oh, how does it build on the main story and add to what it was going for? It really doesn't. But look, it's cool. It's a cool idea and I like it, so it's just gonna have to happen. Logic, progression, get that shit out of here. All that matters is it keeps going, since I want more. Do whatever it takes, I don't care. They're my toys, so they'll fight if I want them to. And that's how I'd sum up what reading The Promise is like, since it's nothing but a bunch of forced conflicts trying to play out despite everything pointing to how they shouldn't even be happening. Like, the basic premise is this. So, after they save the world and everyone's doing great, like, it couldn't be better ending for everyone, Zuko decides to ask Aang that if he ever starts acting like his dad as the new Fire Lord, he'll promise to kill him. And after getting the nod of approval from Katara, Aang agrees. Pause. So, Aang. Known pacifist, someone who does everything in his power to resolve shit peacefully since he was taught to respect life at basically every level. Aang, the guy who even when his own son said he should die, wouldn't kill the power-hungry dictator trying to take over the world since it went against his principles. Aang, the guy so devoted to his beliefs he'd rather risk corrupting his own soul to remove Ozai's bending because he knew he was so unshakable in what he believed. That guy, maybe a couple days after going through that process and saving the world without giving up who he is, would apparently on a fucking whim, pretty much responding to Zuko's shower thoughts, promise to kill him if he went even a smidge out of line. What? This is the promise the book's named after? It's pretty much going against everything Aang ever stood for. He would never agree to this. Oh, and Katara too. Katara, the girl who right after working with Zuko to take down his sister and free the Fire Nation from tyranny, a fight where he sacrificed himself to save her, is not only cool with this, she is convincing Aang to go along with it. Like there's any chance that could actually happen. And also, no one else has anything to say about this? They're all within earshot, right? Sokka, you got anything to say about the guy who helped save your dad and girlfriend from Fire Nation Alcatraz? Toph, any words on how your tea-buddy Iroh would feel about this? Are there no objections here? Not even a little one? We're all just cool with him basically saying he wants to go through death by cop. And Zuko, what's your plan? You just usurped the throne, remember? Promised to make up for the wrongs of the family you just ousted from the throne? Who's gonna do that if you're dead, pal? That's why I called it a shower thought, cause it's something you think could be deep and true in the moment, but once you get out of the shower, you go, oh wait, that's dumb. Glad I didn't say that out loud. And another thing, why would Zuko ever worry he'd be like his dad? Didn't he just go through an arc of resolving the turmoil within himself, learning his dad's a cruel tyrant who'd beat up a child in front of people and scar them just to prove you shouldn't mess with him? Does Zuko think he's gonna do that sometime soon? What could ever in a million years lead to him acting in any way like his dad? Well, as a part of righting the wrongs of his nation, him, Aang, and the Earth King come up with a plan where all the Fire Nation colonies get removed from the Earth Kingdom as an act of goodwill. The only problem, though, is some residents won't go since they've lived there for generations, so consider it their home. And this is the one bit of the story I'll give at least half credit for, since it brings up a real thing people face during Reconstruction. You know, sometimes there's so much history in a place where the cultures intertwine that it sort of reaches over the black and white mentality of getting one out and needs a new distinction. It's one of the only times the comic skirts the edges of being mature. Too bad it doesn't last, because when Zuko sees this and thinks maybe they should reconsider the whole thing, he doesn't just talk to Aang, his closest personal friend. No, that would be rational. That would make sense. But you see, Zuko is not rational here like he was by the end of Season 3. Actually, if anything, he's been regressed to how he was in Season 1 so the conflict can happen. So now he's not the calm, stable guy who thinks things through and relies on people when he needs them. He's the isolated, cranky loner who threatens to burn down a village and goes through with undoing the truce unannounced for literally no reason. No reason at all. He just does it so Aang can see him going back on the truce, and being Aang, known pacifist, after a brief talk doesn't work, he almost goes into the Avatar state to straight up kill him. Aang, everybody! This is who he is now. And you want to guess his reaction to hearing what Zuko found out? Aang, the compromised guy who spent his childhood traveling the world making friends with people all over? Aang, the guy whose girlfriend is a waterbender? Why, of course, it's to say harmony can only exist if they're separate. And the soft, reasonable Earth King, he's not down to compromise either, since, and I shit you not, this is their actual reasoning, he wants to act like a big man who makes decisions before he thinks like his brother. So everyone's just going to war now. Yay! This is totally natural. Like, do you see what I'm getting at? None of this makes sense. It's nothing but contrivance on contrivance to turn what should be resolved in a short conversation into an all-out war for no other reason than that the writer thought it was cool and dramatic. But the truth is, it's not. It's stupid, because everyone's out of character. No one's acting how they should. They're all as unreasonable and rash and irritating as possible to justify making one ass-backwards decision after another. It's completely unsatisfying, especially when the story's as noticeably paper-thin as this one is. I mean, come on, it's Avatar, the series that prided itself on covering complex issues that didn't always have easy solutions. Katara sparing but not choosing to forgive the man who took her mother. Zuko being shunned for his identity after saving a village. The crew stopping Jet since even though he'd suffered, he couldn't kill innocent people. All these uneasy endings came from the characters having natural disagreements or the world not being fair. It never relied on everyone being a brain-dead moron when there's an obvious answer staring them right in the face. And the worst part is that the cast sorta acknowledge this discrepancy sometimes. Like, there's multiple moments in the story where Aang just goes, damn, why did I make that promise? That's not who I am at all. Or Zuko says, I can't be this way, it's not who I am. But it's always in retrospect after it's already happened. Like the writer knew he screwed up, so he snuck these in to pretend it's self-aware. But I don't know, man. That rings pretty hollow when, as Zuko's having problems, his first thought isn't to go to his best friend or his girlfriend or his uncle, but the guy he should know why it's a bad idea to talk to anytime he looks in the mirror. This shouldn't be a hard concept to understand. Zuko would never go to Ozai, but everything's just so swayed to do whatever it takes for this plot to continue, he talks to him multiple times anyway. Fuck, it's like when you're playing the weird route in Deltarune where you just force the characters to do things against their will purely to satisfy your own desires. Except you're not the player, the writer is. He is forcing you to watch him subconsciously puppet these characters to do things even though they all subconsciously know it's not what they're like. And if there's a better description for how bad fanfic writers treat their stories to make them happen, I don't know what is. This is book 1, by the way. Hope you're ready to buckle your fuckle.
Book 2, Validating Headcanon.
Now, to be completely fair here, I want to admit that The Search is the closest these comics ever come to being good. It's still not, but it's trying. And, it probably helps that it's based on the literal one hanging thread the series chose to leave, that being, hey, whatever happened to Zuko's mom? In fact, it was originally supposed to be a TV movie before Nick passed on it to greenlight Korra, so who knows, maybe this took some ideas from that to build its own story. It would for sure explain why this is the only one that has anything engaging, that being pretty much all we learn about Zuko's mom. Unfortunately, though, most of the comic isn't about that. It's about, well, the search for her, which is comparatively really boring and tedious even when it gets messed with by Azula. Alright, so Azula is a great character. Some would even argue she's the best of the series. And yeah, it's a tall order with just how great the whole cast is, but in terms of villains at least, there's no debate. She's the best. Not that Ozai isn't cool and Zuko goes without saying, but no one controls the screen like Azula. Whenever she gets a spotlight, you will sit your ass down and pay attention because she's the definition of captivating. She's strong, controlled, intimidating. She intentionally makes herself hard to read since she's just so good at manipulating manipulating her emotions. It's how she mastered lightning bending, a form that requires a precise, deadly hand with no room for feelings that could mess it up. She's about as disciplined to kill as they come, and that's what makes her downfall so amazing, since it technically comes from getting everything she works so hard for. Like, Ozai appoints her the new Fire Lord when he decides to move on and become world dictator, but even with all that power to match her strength, it's hollow, because she's alone. Isolated. The few friends she had betrayed her when they knew she was going too far, and with Ozai gone too, she doesn't have anyone she can trust. So she starts getting paranoid from that isolation and pressure. She even starts hallucinating her mom in mirrors, making it worse. And it's that brief lapse in sanity that gives Zuko and Katara the opening they need to beat her, and man, what a fitting way for her character to go. Ozai's perfect weapon, made with the intent of one singular purpose, left screaming and crying, knowing she couldn't do it. It's like we're getting a rare glimpse into the other side of Azula, who's just a scared kid looking to please that's terrified of disappointing her dad just like Zuko was. She might know how to put on a mask of not caring, but in this one pivotal moment, we see it slip. But that's not what a bad fanfic writer sees, because they don't see nuance. Actually, they kinda hate it, since the more nuance a character gets, the harder it is to project their own personal takes they probably formed while watching the show. So if they want to try and counter that nuance to keep their vision alive, the only option left is to take everything so much at face value there's no room for interpretation. And this time, the writer only saw Azula as being a crazy psycho bitch. So instead of seeing this moment for the lapse in character it was, they used it as proof for their own take and threw out every other trait she's ever been shown to have. Sure, at one point she was the cool, composed monster with a twinge of humanity, but post-ending, nah son, she's just a power-hungry maniac who's always getting visions of her mom, since did I forget to mention she's crazy? Just look at her eyes in every single panel. She's so unhinged. Who knows what she'll do next? Oh wait, she'll do the thing she does every time, which is fight and say everyone's conspiring with her mom since they made the vision she had in a psychotic break a main feature of her character now? No way! Wow, it's almost like they did that to simplify her, since trying to write something as complex as she used to be would be way harder. Like, what do I want to do here? Should I try to balance the cold, sarcastic apathy and unpredictable nature she's always had, or do I want to write the exact same reaction 10 times over to help emphasize my point? Gee, decisions. But I guess that's just the crux of bad fanfic character writing. It's not interested in telling a story with the cast the way we've come to know them. It just tells a story that reinforces how they think they're supposed to be. So they'll take a scene from the show to lend it some credibility, strip all the context that gave that scene meaning, add on some layers of interpretive ooze, and voila, you got something that's close enough to seem right while trashing all the bits that didn't line up with your headcanon. Now you just gotta contend with how you've turned them into an empty shell to avoid reflecting on your own biases. Yay! But there's also a big downside in setting up characters this way, since it kinda reveals the name of the game if you don't have any ideas for where to take them. I mean, you're already tossing away most of what made the character who they are, so the least you could do is give them a new direction, right? It doesn't excuse ripping apart their personality to keep the bitch you liked, but at least it gives you a reason to make it a central theme of the narrative. Just look at something like The Last Jedi. Good movie? Not really. The way it characterizes Luke? Pretty bad. But you gotta admit, it had a story to tell through that version of the character, one with development and a message. There was a point beyond making someone's headcanon reality. But the bad fanfic writer doesn't think about the journey, they only care about the destination. So once they've proven Azula's a cuckoo crazy bitch who's suffering from delusions, that's about where her character starts and ends. Sometimes there's changes from Zuko's side, him wanting to close the gap between them caused by years of rivalry, but honestly it might as well not even be there, cause the writer's already done all they want with Azula. There was never a plan to use her new mental issues for anything. It was just about showing that that's who the character is. So from there, she's basically on a loop. She acts out, gets called crazy, says they're all working for her mom, Zuko calms her down, she gets a new vision, rinse and repeat till it gets really boring. And then just to have her run off at the end since, hey, character arcs are only a suggestion. And okay, I know I'm sort of just using fanfic writing as a reference here, but seriously, there's nothing that screams, I didn't think this through, like having someone you've been hinting at development just running away so they don't have to. It's probably the cheapest way you could take a character you've been baiting us with for over 200 fucking pages. And she comes back too. Yeah, she's the villain of another book from the same writer, and guess what? She does end up changing. completely off screen. Why didn't we get to see this change in the 200-page book she's a major character of? Well, normally I'd give the benefit of the doubt here, but since we're going by fanfic writer logic, chances are it just took them that long to actually come up with something. So remember, kids, when you write yourself into a corner, just delay it as much as possible until you find a way out. Don't worry, no one will get mad. You turn the comments off, right?
Book 3. Shitty Copying.
And there's a reason I'm using the Rift for this example, since the other comics in this video, they're all annoying and dull and have shit that gets under my skin, but they're also unique, you know? It feels like they're trying to add something to Avatar it's never had before. Usually what it adds is just abysmal dog shit, but if nothing else, I can give them credit for ambition. This one, though, this is what I'd call among fanfics the if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's kind of the opposite of what I just got done explaining. See, when they're writing like Azula's written across the search, it's to fix how they think the character's supposed to be. They don't like how the show went, so they want to bring it closer to their own interpretation. But with an ain't broke, don't fix it, they've got the opposite problem. They don't want to change anything. To them, the show's already perfect as it is, so if they try to write a story, it's gonna be with this assumption they can never top the original. No matter what they write on their own, it's always gonna be worse than what the show put out, so the only solution is to build their story from a bunch of things the show already did, with just enough to make it feel sorta kinda new-ish. After all, you can't be worse if you're just straight up copying them, but what the bad fanfic writer doesn't take into account with this is that they aren't on the show's level of writing quality. Obviously, and there's nothing that makes that more obvious than when they open themselves up to direct comparison. I mean, just through the nature of fanfic, you're kind of doing that already, but you're making it way easier when people can side-by-side it to what you're pulling from. And that's the main thing wrong with the Rift. It's just recycled ideas that put through the lens of a writer who's completely out of their depth aren't nearly as good. And it's worse when you notice they didn't really get what the show was going for in the first place. Like, let's start from what this comic's about. Toph. So, Toph exists at this very interesting intersection of common character traits that make her stand out. You know, she's tough and stubborn, but she isn't cold. She's overly brash, but smart and focused. She loves making quips, but it's always from a genuine place. Everything about her exists in this weird equilibrium where she's never exactly how you expect her to be, and a lot of that has to do with how she grew up, since on one hand, she was this noble girl raised with traditional skills and patience, but on the other, she's this intuitive fighter who learned to fend for herself using earthbending. And you might think those sides would clash for some conflicting feelings about her identity, but they hardly ever do. Toph doesn't have any hangups about being a rich girl or being a fighter. She just sees them as different skills she can use when she needs them in the moment. The only ones who made it an issue were her parents, who, in wanting to keep her safe, couldn't accept she'd found a way to beat her blindness. And it's that disconnect from her family that the Rift wants to tackle again, which, hey, on its own, isn't a terrible idea, since it was an avenue of the story without much of a resolution. I could see this being a good way to explore Toph a little more as a character. But on top of how it's structured exactly like her intro episode, except instead of rejecting she's a bender after seeing her fight, this time her dad says he was wrong, there's also the problem with how this completely misunderstands his reason for rejecting her. Cause like I just got done saying, the thing he couldn't accept was that his daughter was strong. Like his exact words were, "My daughter is blind. She is blind and tiny and helpless and fragile." So he lays it on pretty thick what his damage is. But even though it's copying so much from the episode that line spoken in, this doesn't convey that at all, since somehow the writer didn't get it. The way this portrays him is the more generic route, where the thing he couldn't accept was the idea she wasn't a proper girl and disowned her. And you may not think that's a big discrepancy, but it actually has a massive effect on the entirety of the comic. Since Toph isn't just seeking the freedom to be who she wants anymore, she's actively against any form of tradition. And what do you know? The other part of this is about Aang wanting to keep his traditions alive. See, the main premise here is that Aang, trying to contact another avatar, Yang Chen, tries to hold a festival on sacred ground where his people used to celebrate, and in the process he finds a crystal mill run by Toph's dad that's polluting the environment, but she seems to like since it's the future. Now I'll get to all of that in a second, but for now let's stay on Toph, since I can tell that with her new love of progress, they're trying to do something like what her and Katara thought since they had different teaching methods. It's supposed to be a clash in opinion where from Aang's side, you can see why he'd want to keep his traditions and land, while from Toph's, you can see why she wouldn't and thinks there's benefits in change. What trips this whole thing up though is that putting aside what's making Toph act this way to begin with is wrong, their responses to each other are also way too disproportionate. Like when Toph and Katara thought it was mostly this back and forth bickering since they naturally got on each other's nerves. You couldn't say one was more at fault than the other, so neither looked worse, and that's clearly what this is going for too, but Toph is transparently worse here. I mean, even with the new backstory they give where she was forced to stick to traditions and didn't like it, I think there's a big difference between I'm not gonna be who you tell me to and, well, Aang, if the world's been fine without your traditions of bowing to a statue and playing music so far, maybe they should just be forgotten. Like, whoa, bitch, he's tried to preserve the culture of his people that were wiped out 100 years ago. Who cares if he doesn't know exactly why they were performed? It's important to him. And most of it's the most harmless stuff imaginable, so for her to brush it off, crush their instruments, say it's fine that a big polluting factory's there since she suddenly gets into boys for this absolute Randy that's running it, how am I supposed to take that? There's no getting around it. This makes Toph look awful, and the writer doesn't even seem to realize. They think they're creating a compelling narrative where you can see both sides of the argument, when no, one of them is more unreasonable here. And they try to make it seem like Aang's not great either after a while, wanting to tear down the factory, since it would put the staff out of work, but aside from how he could probably just ask to build it somewhere else with the help of the Earth King, from his perspective, it's tear down that factory, or it gets torn down anyways, and everyone dies to the spirit they angered by building there. He has way more reason to tear it down than Toph has to defend it, which she only does because she's not willing to trust Aang's judgments. And in the end, what does that stubbornness amount to? Her basically goading him into killing the spirit, creating a rift, so Toph can hang on to her idea of progress. It makes her look so fucking selfish, but the book has no self-awareness about it. I think the idea it's going for is something like when refugees took up the abandoned air temple, where it's mentioned progress isn't something you can stop so you have to embrace it. But another thing that episode said was that progress should be done with respect to nature and the history of the land, and there's no respect here. They blatantly say Aang's traditions need to be changed for the sake of progress, but why does progress need to happen here? You know, when I see factory workers breaking a promise to keep a land clean by industrializing it, I don't tend to imagine forward-thinking inventors. No, to me, it reads more like the US promising natives they'd leave some land alone and then killing them when they realized there was gold underneath. Doesn't look as good telling Aang he needs to leave his traditions behind now, does it? And they don't even have a good rebuttal for why they were right to be so stubborn and kill the spirit. All that happens is another spirit comes around, says he was wrong and humans are great, and when Aang points out they didn't keep their promise, she just says, yeah, guess you're right there, you kinda shit the bed, but, you'll do better next time, probably. Humans are cool, or something. Bye. I swear, I wish I was making this up, but that's legit the takeaway. And they just do a version of the festival that integrates new stuff, like somehow that shows they've reached a good middle ground. It's such a half-hearted nothing burger of an ending. This is why you don't copy shit from the show without knowing how it works. You get all these inconsistencies that make for a way clunkier story in the long run. It's infuriating. But it also gets worse.
Book 4, DeviantArt Love Triangles.
Oh yeah, you knew I couldn't talk about fanfic writing without bringing OC romances in. What would a video like this be without it? Probably easier for one thing, but alas, even with some of the blandest Katang moments ever, they just weren't satisfied till they had some relationship drama. Which sucks, because I thought Avatar was for the most part pretty good about that stuff. I wouldn't say it was the best part of the show. At times, Katang could feel a little sitcom-y as a ship, and the bait with Zuko, that was kind of painful, but I feel like it balanced out by the time Aang realized he couldn't give up his earthly attachments because of her, and from there I think Season 3 is pretty engaging, since there's actual shit that keeps them from thinking about it, but you can tell their romance is trying to bloom. It's very natural for the story, and it helped that the staff knew never to make it so prominent it could take away from that. But that's not the mindset of fanfic writing, because in fanfic you don't have to worry about consistency or logic. You just gotta focus on either validating your favorite ships or invalidating the ones you hate. So Aang and Katara, they're great. They're perfect. Nothing's wrong with them. Ever wanted to see them call each other sweetie all day like a suburban real estate couple? Great news. But ooh, Zuko and Mai, the ones who are naturally in love to the point she'd give up everything she had if it meant saving him? Sorry, buddy. Doesn't look like that's on the menu tonight. Side note, have you ever thought Avatar didn't have enough cuckoldry? Yep. If your favorite part of Sokka and Yume's relationship was her being engaged already, please get away from me. Have I got the story for you? Or well, technically it's a love triangle story, where Zuko's competing with another guy to be with Mai after they broke up in the promise, but really it's just this ping pong between one flirting with Mai and the other getting a panel to look on sadly in their metaphorical cuck chair. But who could ever compete with Zuko for Mai? I mean, they're so well suited for each other. Just two teens who hate the world and everything around them for pretty sensible reasons, but find a little bright spot when they're with each other. It's a sweet dynamic, so if they're gonna split them up, they better have something that's just as sweet to match it, and Who the fuck is this guy? So I haven't touched on the comic's original characters yet, and that's mostly because, well, aside from the fact I just didn't want to, they've also never had a big enough role to be worth mentioning. Like, what? There's Toph's students at the metal bending school she runs, Zuko's mom's new family, that twink guy Toph's supposed to be in love with. It's kind of been slim pickings so far, and I've appreciated that. It's less mess to worry about. But for this book, I guess the writer still had some boxes to tick, so we've officially got an important OC in the form of K-Lo, who's a guy. Yeah, he's a guy by definition, I checked. And he's alright, listen, the only shit he's got going for him is that he's another guy after Mai, and he's sorta connected to the main story, which I put in air quotes there since it's supposed to be what the comic's about, but it all feels like a tangent next to the love triangle, so it's kind of an afterthought. But apparently it's that Mai's dad wants to overthrow Zuko to get Ozai back in charge while he's secretly being played with by Azula, and Kalo was a spy meant to recruit Mai who turned to her side once the dad tried killing Zuko's family. And now I could go on about that and how utterly frustrating it is that Mai won't say it's her dad as he tries killing literal women and children, or I could mention how their plan of stealing kids to make people think spirits are mad is stupid when Aang's right there to say that's not how it works, but do you even give a shit next to the cucking stuff? It feels secondary, right? You're not paying attention to that when there's something infinitely more interesting going on next to it, and it's sort of the main flaw with fanfic romance. Sometimes it's not even trying to be the focus, but through sheer force of cringe, it can't help but suck everything around it into its orbits. And this one especially sucks since, for one thing, Zuko and Mai are totally mischaracterized. Like, since when was it a thing that Mai played with guys' hearts or wasn't direct? We've only ever seen her be the exact opposites. And secondly, how am I supposed to get invested in the love triangle when the other guy is literally nothing? I know I just said his name a minute ago, but seriously, who gives a shit? This is the most blatantly unimportant guy I've ever seen in my life. He looks like a background character, and he's got a personality to match. You want to know his main character trait? He's nice. He's a nice guy. He's the nicest guy you ever damn seen. And look, he's travel size too. You just gotta soak him in water and he'll shrivel up nice and easy. It's a perk that comes from having the consistency of cardboard. Why else do you think he's not on any of the covers? He's hidden in Mai's dress, duh. What other reason could there be? After all, he's just as important as anyone else, right? That's why you can totally believe him when he says Mai is his girl. Dude, the drama is so fucking real. Damn it, bring him in, it's starting to rain, we can't get him wet. No, but for real, he clearly doesn't matter. And that's what makes it so confounding that the story tries to say he isn't. It wants you to think this guy and Mai are destined to stay together. And after a certain point, Zuko doesn't even try to disagree. It really just becomes Avatar cuck theater for a while. And with just how brazen this guy is about Zuko needing to move on since he's with Mai, I legit think that's how it would have stayed if this wasn't an official comic, since in a fanfic, that would be the end of it. But even with all I've just said so far, you gotta keep in mind that these do in fact have editors. So there had to have been a moment where they realized where this was headed and said, hey, don't do that. This guy is nobody. Which would explain why after everything, he suddenly decides he's gotta go. No build-up, no goodbye, not even an explanation. He just dips. It's so abrupt, it's kind of great. They really just banished this guy to the Shadow Realm to keep it from getting worse. I kind of love that. And Zuko and Mai don't even get back together. It's a lose-lose for everyone. I couldn't think of a funnier outcome. I was gonna tie it back into a thing about how fanfic romance is inherently fragile and ends as suddenly as it starts, but nah, man, it's just funny.
Book 5, Magic Conflict Generator.
Right, so remember when I said the best way to describe fanfic writing is someone bashing their action figures together because it's cool? Well, this is what happens when a friend comes over and says they don't act like that, so now you have to try and think up an actual logical reason for why they're fighting. But there is no logical reason, it's just self-indulgent fantasy. So what's the next best thing? Make some shit up. You ever seen an anime filler movie? Just do one of those. Except North and South makes one big mistake. See, anime filler movies like to have conflicts that are completely disconnected from the rest of the series, and there's a strategy there. It stops it from clashing with the show's continuity. It's basically what the new Avatar movie does. Aang doesn't have to deal with anything that contradicts the show since the new airbender he finds was stuck in a mountain somewhere. Boom. Continuity unbastardized. But at this point, you should know, fanfic writers aren't that careful. So North and South has a story that's so full of plot holes, there's no way the writer missed it. Like, I can forgive a small mistake here and there, you're not gonna catch every little line, but this goes beyond just contradicting lore or even the characters, though there's some of that too. But no, North and South's conflict literally relies on shit we're explicitly told isn't the case. Let me explain. The basic idea of this is that when Katara and Sokka get back to the Southern Water Tribe, they see it's grown a lot with the help of the North, who apparently think of the Southerners as cavemen who need saving to be a real society. And since some of the warriors aren't on board with that, they try to stage a revolt to, in essence, keep the genes pure. And Jesus fuck, this is stupid. Like, first of all, sure, the Northern Water Tribe were bigger than the South, but they very clearly never looked down on them. Actually, they always treated them like you'd expect, as brothers in arms. There was never animosity, and from what we did see of their differences, at least culturally, it was the North who were behind, not the South. Remember the episode about their old-fashioned gender norms Katara had to fight through, or how Katara's grandmother left since she didn't want to stick to their traditions, or even how the South were seasoned warriors while the North's newest Fire Nation armor was 100 years out of date? I mean, the North were isolationists, that's how they survived. So why are the North seen as the modern ones? Because they live in a city? You know, the South used to have a city too, right? And it doesn't even match with the cultures they're supposed to be coming from. The Water Tribes aren't the industrial ones, that's the Fire Nation. You know, the ones who manipulate something common in factories. If anything, the Water Tribe was the most dependent specifically on bending. They don't have trains or ships or self-powered mechanisms, they still use wooden rafts and sails for fuck's sake. Their entire society is formed from using the water and ice around them, so does it really seem natural for them to just open a factory? I get that culture's always progressing and whatnot, but out of all the remaining nations, they would be the slowest to adapt, especially the North. This feels like it's completely based on looks, but obviously that can't be true since, well, if you took a look at the Southern Tribe, you'd realize there's not that many of them. The South was decimated by war and genocide. Their numbers were thinned to where Katara was their only bender. There's maybe 40 people in their main village. The South was on the verge of literal extinction at the start of the show, so where did all these guys come from? Who are they? Everyone acts like they've just been there the whole time, but if you've watched the first episode, you know they weren't. Where are they hiding? And how is there enough of them to have two sides to a conflict? Most of these guys basically poofed in from thin air. And the actual thing they're fighting for is dumb too, since like I said, they were decimated by war. They're not in a position to act like they don't need help. They were reduced to a collection of tents. People should be ecstatic at the prospect of full homes and commerce. It's objectively better than what they had. You can try to frame it as worse by saying they're harvesting oil or erasing their way of life, but their way of life before was barely surviving. The North coming in is supposed to be seen as this civilizing the savages thing, where it's framed like they're forcing their way of life onto the South, who were perfectly fine living like they were, but that wasn't just culture, that was necessity. They had to live that way. It's like looking at war-torn Ukraine and thinking, but we wouldn't want to damage their culture by rebuilding their homes. Like, it's just a shitty, poorly thought out take on colonialism, and that's emphasized by how they directly compare it to their other one. Yeah, this tries to say the North coming in to help is exactly like when they built a factory on Aang's ritual spot, but buddy, that was done without consent on sacred ground and put everyone's lives in danger. This is a net positive meant to help the people that were living there. These aren't comparable in any way except for how badly they cover the subject, but hey, at least the message about progress being good fits this time. Broken clocks being right twice a day and whatever. Still doesn't change that these are without a doubt the definition of fanfic writing. And just to be clear with that, I want to say something. I know not all fanfic is inherently bad. Sometimes it can be a really good outlet for potential writers to dip their toes in with a world that's already made for them, and I don't think the intent with saying this feels like fanfic was ever to disparage those types of people. It's not a statement against the entirety of the concept, just the worst aspects of it that give it a bad name in the first place. And with this video, I hope I've shed some light on what those aspects are. Of course, it doesn't cover every bad trope they have. If I tried to do that, this would be a much longer, much more painful video to get through, but I think I got my point across of what the big ones are. Self-indulgence, contrivance, no comprehension, lack of consistency, poorly thought vision, and no self-awareness. Put them together, and you've got the makings of a spiritual bad fanfic. Sorry in advance for whatever you realize this applies to. That being said, thanks for watching, and God, let's hope Seven Havens is decent. I can't go through with this shit again, man.